The battlefield was silent now, but the silence was heavy and full of smoke. Machines lay broken across the ground. Pieces of metal were scattered everywhere. The war between humans and the alien empire had been going on for many years, and the land carried the scars of endless fights. Paul, a young human mechanic, walked slowly through the ruins. He was not a soldier. He never wanted to carry a weapon. His skills were in machines, engines, and armor. That was why he had been sent here, not to fight but to recover scraps and technology from the wreckage. He wore a worn jacket, carried a heavy bag of tools on his back, and had grease marks on his face. Paul stepped carefully, checking the remains of a crashed transport ship. It had fallen hard from the sky. Fire still burned in some places, and wires sparked. He coughed from the smoke but kept moving. He was used to this kind of scene. Normally he only found machines or ruined equipment. But today was different. As he reached the broken entrance of the ship, he stopped. His eyes widened. Inside, near the wall, a figure was lying on the ground. The figure was tall, wearing strange silver armor, but the armor was cracked in many places. Sparks of blue energy leaked from the broken plates. The figure moved slightly, showing signs of life. Paul's heart jumped. It was not a human soldier. It was one of them. An alien warrior. He had heard many stories about these warriors. They were strong, proud, and deadly in battle. Humans feared them, but they also respected them. And now one was lying helpless in front of him. He could turn around and leave. He could wait for a human patrol to find her. But something inside him refused to walk away. He stepped closer. The alien lifted her head slowly. Her helmet had broken at the side, and through the crack he saw her eyes. They were golden, glowing faintly even in the smoke. She looked at him with weakness but also suspicion. Her lips moved, but her voice was faint, almost a whisper. Paul could not understand her language, but he understood her state. She was badly injured. Her armor was her life, and it was failing. If the energy core shut down, she would not survive. Paul knelt beside her. He opened his tool bag and looked at the armor more closely. The design was advanced, far beyond human technology, but he could see how it worked. Energy conduits were broken. The shielding plates were loose. Parts of the system were fried. To most humans, it would look impossible to fix. To Paul, it looked like a challenge. The alien weakly raised her hand as if to stop him, but then she dropped it, too tired to resist. She must have thought he was foolish for trying. Paul gave a small smile, even though he knew she could not understand. "You are not done yet," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I can fix this." He pulled out his tools. A small welder, a pack of wires, clamps, and pieces of scrap metal he had collected earlier. He worked fast. He cut broken wires and replaced them with human wires. He reshaped a steel plate and used it to cover a gap in her chest armor. He carefully reconnected the energy conduits so the power could flow again. Every move was risky. If he made a mistake, the core could overload. But Paul was steady. He had repaired hundreds of machines in his life. This was different, but at the same time, it was the same. It was a machine that needed care. The alien watched him with tired eyes. She did not understand why a human would help her. She had fought against his kind. Her people had crushed human cities. Yet here was this young man, risking his life to save her armor. Time passed slowly. The smoke around them began to fade as the fires died. Paul's hands moved with skill, covered in black dust and sparks, but he never stopped. Sweat ran down his face, but he kept going. At last he closed the final plate, sealed the last wire, and pressed the restart switch. The armor gave a low hum. Lights spread across the plates. Energy flowed again. The cracks glowed faintly as the system regained power. The alien took a deep breath. Her chest armor rose and fell as it stabilized her body. She moved her arms slightly, testing the weight. The glow in her eyes grew stronger. For the first time, Paul saw her strength return. She sat up slowly, her tall frame towering over him even while injured. She looked at him closely, as if trying to understand him. Paul sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead, breathing heavily. "There," he said, not knowing if she understood his words. "You should be fine now." The alien tilted her head. For a moment, Paul thought she might attack him. She was a warrior after all, and he was the enemy. But instead she only looked at him with silence. Her golden eyes burned with a strange light. Paul stood up and stepped back. He picked up his tool bag and slung it over his shoulder. He thought she would leave now. That was fine with him. He had done his part. He was not expecting thanks. But as he turned to walk away, he felt her gaze still fixed on him. He did not know that this simple act of fixing her armor would change both their lives. Far above, the sky rumbled as ships moved in the distance. The war was not over. But in that quiet ruin, something had begun. A bond between a human mechanic and a broken warrior. Paul walked away into the smoke, not realizing that the alien was already making a choice. She would not forget this act. And soon, she would rise again, not only as a warrior, but as a protector. The night grew darker over the battlefield. Faint fires glowed in the distance, and the wind carried the smell of smoke and metal. Paul walked carefully, his bag heavy on his back. He kept looking behind him. The memory of the alien warrior lying in the ruins still filled his mind. He thought she would leave, but when he reached the edge of the destroyed field, he realized she was following him. Her steps were unsteady at first. Her armor had been repaired enough to function, but it was still weak. The silver plates carried dents, and sparks still flickered along the sides. Yet she walked behind him without saying a word. Her golden eyes never left him. Paul did not know what to do. He was only a mechanic. He had no plan for keeping an alien warrior with him. But something inside told him that leaving her alone would mean death for her. So, after a few minutes of silence, he finally spoke. "If you are going to follow me, then stay quiet. Patrols sometimes pass through here. If they find us together, they will shoot first and ask questions later." The alien tilted her head, as if trying to make sense of his words. She could not understand the human language fully, but she seemed to understand his tone. She gave no reply, only followed him deeper into the ruined streets. Paul led her through narrow alleys until he reached a hidden entrance under a pile of broken stone. He knelt, moved a sheet of metal aside, and revealed a tunnel. "This way," he said, lowering himself into the dark passage. She hesitated for a moment but then stepped in after him. The tunnel led to a small underground workshop. Old lights flickered, powered by a small generator Paul had built from scrap. The walls were lined with shelves full of wires, gears, and metal plates. In the center stood a work table surrounded by half-repaired machines. This was Paul's refuge, the only safe place he knew in a world torn by war. The alien warrior stepped into the workshop and looked around. She stood tall even in the low space, her armor brushing against the ceiling pipes. She examined everything in silence, her gaze sharp. Paul noticed how careful she was. Even in weakness, she carried herself like a soldier ready for battle. Paul placed his bag down and turned to her. "You are lucky I found you," he said. "But if you stay here, I need to do more. That armor is not stable. It could fail any moment." She stared at him, not moving. Paul sighed. "I guess you cannot understand. But if you want to survive, I need to risk another repair." He picked up his tools again. The alien finally lowered herself onto a metal bench. She sat with heavy grace, her armor creaking. She placed her hands on her knees and leaned slightly forward, as if to show him she accepted. Paul studied the armor closely under the dim light. He saw deep cracks hidden beneath the plates. The energy conduits were badly damaged. His earlier work had only been enough to restart the system, but it would not last long. If he wanted to save her completely, he would need to rebuild parts of the core with both human and alien parts together. That was dangerous. Mixing human wires with alien energy could cause an explosion. If he failed, both of them could die. But Paul was not the kind of man who gave up. He tightened his gloves and began. He first disconnected the damaged power lines. Sparks shot out, but he caught them with clamps. He pulled out broken crystals from the energy chamber and replaced them with fragments he had collected from fallen alien drones. The warrior watched him closely. Every move he made, her eyes followed. It was strange for her to see a human handle alien technology with such confidence. As the hours passed, Paul worked without rest. He spoke softly to himself while working. This wire goes here. This plate will hold if I tighten it enough. This joint needs a new seal. His voice was calm, though sweat rolled down his face. The alien remained silent, but she started to understand something. This human was not afraid of her. He was not fixing her armor for a reward. He was doing it because he could not stand to see something broken left unfinished. She felt a strange warmth inside her chest. At one point, the generator light flickered, and the whole workshop went dark. Paul froze. Without power, he could not see the delicate lines inside the armor. Before he could move, the alien raised her hand. From her palm came a faint glow of energy, enough to light the table. Paul looked at her in surprise, then smiled. "Thank you. That helps." She did not reply, but her golden eyes softened for the first time. Hours later, Paul finally sealed the armor with a new core stabilizer. He stood back, breathing hard, his hands black with grease. "It should work now," he said. The alien warrior looked down at herself. She pressed a symbol on her chest plate, and the armor came alive with stronger energy. The cracks glowed blue, then settled into smooth lines of power. The hum grew deeper, steady, and powerful. For the first time since she fell, her armor felt whole again. She stood up from the bench. The energy shield extended around her, glowing faintly. She moved her arms, tested her boosters, and raised her blade from the side compartment. Everything worked. She looked at Paul again, towering over him. Paul expected her to leave now. She was strong again. She had no reason to stay. He turned to clean his tools, thinking she would walk out of the workshop. But instead she placed her hand on the table with a firm sound. He turned back to her. Her voice was deep and strong now, no longer weak. She spoke in her language, but her tone carried meaning even without words. Paul frowned. "I don't understand." She then placed her hand on her chest armor and then pointed at him. The message was simple, clear, and filled with honor. Paul froze. He did not need to know her words. He understood her gesture. She was saying she owed him her life. She was saying she would protect him. He shook his head slowly. "You don't have to. I only fixed your armor." But her eyes burned with a promise. To her people, a life debt was unbreakable. She had already made her choice. In that underground workshop, under the dim lights and broken machines, a bond was forged. Paul had risked everything to repair her. Now she would risk everything to stand by him. The first rays of morning light slipped through cracks in the broken city above. Paul was still inside his underground workshop, leaning against the wall. He had worked all night repairing the alien warrior's armor, and his body begged for rest. His hands were sore, his eyes heavy, but his mind refused to stop. He kept replaying what had happened. He had saved her. The tall warrior now stood in the center of the workshop, her silver armor glowing with steady energy. The faint hum of power filled the air like a heartbeat. She moved with more strength now, her stance solid, her breathing no longer strained. She was no longer a broken figure on the battlefield. She was awake again. Paul rubbed his eyes and looked at her carefully. She was not just some soldier. He could feel her presence, strong and commanding. Even standing still, she seemed like a storm ready to break free. Yet when her golden eyes turned toward him, there was no anger. Only a sharp focus, as if she was trying to understand the man who had rebuilt her strength. The alien warrior tested her armor with slow movements. She lifted her arms, activated the shield around her wrist, and swung her blade in the air. The sound of energy slicing through the room made Paul's chest tighten. She was dangerous, and he knew it. But instead of fear, he felt a strange calm. He trusted her, though he did not fully understand why. At last, she spoke. Her voice was stronger than before, steady and commanding. The words were in her own language, sharp and unfamiliar. Paul could not understand them, but he understood the tone. She was telling him something important. I cannot understand, he admitted. But I can guess. You feel different now, don't you? She placed her hand on her chest armor and gave a short nod. Her movements were firm, full of meaning. She pointed at herself, then at him. It was the same gesture as before, but stronger now. A promise. Paul lowered his head, shaking it slowly. I told you, you don't owe me anything. I just fixed what was broken. She stepped closer, her armor humming with power. Paul could feel the warmth of the energy radiating from her suit. She stopped just a few feet away and stared down at him. Her eyes burned brighter, golden light glowing like fire. In her gaze, Paul saw a deep resolve. She would not let him walk away from this bond. Paul sighed. All right. If that is how you see it, I won't argue anymore. But if you are staying here, then we need to understand each other better. The warrior tilted her head slightly. She did not speak, but she waited, as if inviting him to continue. Paul stepped to a table covered with tools and scraps. He picked up 2 pieces of metal, one human steel and one alien alloy. He held them up for her to see. This is me, he said, lifting the steel. And this is you. He tapped the alien alloy. Alone, they are strong, but together, they can become something better. He placed them together and began welding them with his small tool. Sparks flew, and the 2 pieces became one stronger plate. He held it up with a smile. See? Stronger. The alien warrior's eyes narrowed. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched the welded plate. She traced the line where the metals had joined, then lifted her gaze to Paul. For the first time, her face softened. Not a smile, not yet, but a recognition. That was when Paul realized something. She had been abandoned. She had been left behind by her own people, left to die in broken armor. That was why she had looked at him with suspicion at first. She was a commander, a warrior, and yet she had been discarded. His repair had given her more than strength. It had given her a reason to stand again. The silence between them was broken by the distant sound of explosions above. Paul's workshop shook lightly as dust fell from the ceiling. He looked up with worry. They are getting closer. If the enemy finds this place, we will both be in trouble. The warrior's head turned sharply toward the sound. She stepped toward the tunnel entrance and activated her visor. Blue lines of data flashed across her helmet, scanning the area. She turned back to Paul and motioned for him to stay. Paul frowned. Wait, are you going out there? She gave a short nod, then pressed her hand against her chest again before pointing at him. The same promise, but now filled with action. Paul understood. She was not only saying she would protect him. She was proving it. Before he could stop her, she moved up the tunnel and disappeared into the ruined streets. Paul ran to the entrance, crouching low to watch. He saw her step into the daylight, her silver armor glowing bright against the grey sky. Enemy patrol drones flew over the rubble, scanning for survivors. Soldiers followed behind them, their weapons raised. Paul's heart raced. He wanted to yell for her to come back, but then he saw her move. She charged forward with speed that shocked him. The shield on her arm flashed to life, deflecting the first volley of shots. Sparks lit the air as bullets and beams bounced off her glowing barrier. She leaped into the air, boosters firing from her back, and crashed down among the drones. With one swing of her blade, she cut two of them in half. The soldiers shouted, trying to surround her. But she was no longer weak. She was awakened, a storm in armor. She moved like lightning, striking, blocking, cutting through metal and fire. Her voice roared as she fought, her armor shining with the repairs Paul had made. From the tunnel, Paul watched in awe. He had never seen such power. The alien warrior he had saved was no ordinary soldier. She was something far greater. And now, all that power was turned toward protecting him. The battle lasted only minutes. When it was done, the drones were smoking wrecks, and the soldiers had fled into the distance. The warrior stood tall in the middle of the rubble, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. She raised her blade once more, then let it rest at her side. Paul stepped out of the tunnel, looking at the battlefield she had cleared. His voice was full of wonder. You really mean it, don't you? She turned toward him, her armor shining in the morning light. Slowly, she raised her hand again, pointing first to herself, then to him. Paul gave a tired laugh. All right. You protect me. And maybe I'll keep your armor running. For the first time, her eyes softened in a way that almost looked like gratitude. She had awakened not only as a warrior but as something more. She was no longer fighting for an empire that had abandoned her. She was fighting for the human who had given her strength when she had nothing left. And from that moment, their journey together truly began. The smoke from the battle drifted away slowly, leaving silence across the ruins. Pieces of broken drones still burned on the ground, their black shells glowing with faint sparks. Paul stood at the edge of the rubble, his chest rising and falling as he tried to understand what he had just witnessed. The alien warrior stood in the middle of the destroyed machines. Her silver armor glowed brighter now, steady and alive. She looked like a living tower of strength, calm but unshakable. Her golden eyes fixed on Paul, not on the wreckage, not on the sky, but only on him. Paul swallowed hard. He had seen soldiers fight before, but nothing like this. She had faced a patrol of drones and soldiers alone, and she had won as if it were nothing. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the broken ground. You did that, for me. His voice was quiet, full of disbelief. She raised her hand to her chest, the symbol of her life debt, and then pointed at him. It was the same gesture she had made before, but now it carried more weight. The fight had proven her words. Paul shook his head slowly. You don't understand. I'm just a mechanic. I'm not worth risking your life for. Her golden eyes narrowed. She tilted her head slightly, then stepped closer until she was standing right in front of him. Her shadow fell across him, and the hum of her armor surrounded him like a shield. She spoke, her voice strong in her alien tongue. He could not understand the words, but he felt the meaning. It was not about worth. It was about honor. It was about a promise. Paul let out a long breath. He realized she was not going to leave him. He had repaired her armor, but in doing so, he had awakened more than just her strength. He had awakened her sense of duty. All right, he said softly. If you're going to stay, then I guess we need to know each other better. The warrior gave a small nod. Paul pointed at himself. Paul. She tilted her head again, studying him. Then she spoke a single word, slow and heavy. Arya. Paul blinked. He was not sure if that was her real name or something close enough for him to understand, but he accepted it. He repeated it carefully. Arya. For the first time, her stern face softened. She gave a short nod. From that moment, they were no longer just mechanic and stranger. They had names. They had begun to see each other as more than just enemies from two different sides of the war. Back in the workshop, Paul guided Arya through the tunnel. Once inside, she sat down on the metal bench again while he began checking her armor for damage from the fight. He worked quietly, but his mind was racing. She was powerful, unstoppable even, but she had chosen to stand beside him. As he tightened a plate on her shoulder, Paul spoke. You know, humans don't believe in life debt like your people do. But we believe in promises. And I think you are making one now. Arya's golden eyes met his, steady and unblinking. She placed her hand on his arm gently. It was the first time she had touched him without armor between them. Her hand was strong, but her grip was careful, almost respectful. She said his name slowly, testing the sound. Paul. He looked at her in surprise. She had learned his name. That single word carried the promise more clearly than any gesture. Before he could reply, the ground above shook again. Distant rumbling echoed through the ruined city. Paul frowned. They are searching. That fight will bring more soldiers. This place won't stay safe forever. Arya stood, her armor glowing faintly. She pointed upward, then at him again. Her meaning was clear. She would fight for him, no matter what came. Paul shook his head, half smiling. You really mean it, don't you? You're not going anywhere. She gave a firm nod. Over the next hours, Paul worked on improving her armor with the few resources he had left. He replaced weak joints with reinforced steel from human machines. He rewired part of her energy shield with human power cells. Arya watched him closely, sometimes guiding him by pointing at alien runes or adjusting a part he missed. They worked together as if they had done this many times before. When they finally finished, Arya stood taller than ever. Her armor was no longer just alien design. It was a mix of alien power and human creativity. A hybrid suit, unique and strong. She tested it, the hum deeper, the shield brighter. Paul sat back, exhausted but proud. There. Now you're ready for anything. Arya placed her hand on her chest again, but this time she lowered her head slightly toward him. It was more than a gesture of debt. It was respect. It was a promise spoken without words. Paul felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had always thought of himself as just a mechanic, someone small in a war too big to understand. But now, standing before this powerful warrior who had chosen to protect him, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt important. That night, as they rested in the workshop, Paul could not sleep. He kept looking at Arya, who sat silently near the entrance, her golden eyes watching the shadows. She did not need rest like he did. She stayed awake, guarding him through the night. Paul whispered softly, almost to himself. You're serious, aren't you? You're really going to protect me? Arya did not answer with words. She did not need to. Her presence was the answer. For Paul, this was the beginning of something he could not yet understand. He had given her back her strength. In return, she had given him her promise. And that promise was stronger than any armor he could build. The war outside still raged, but inside that small workshop, a new alliance had been born. An alliance not of governments or armies, but of two individuals bound by trust. Paul closed his eyes at last, letting sleep take him. As he drifted away, he knew one thing for certain. No matter what battles came, no matter how dangerous the future was, he would not face it alone. Because Arya had promised. And she would not break her word. The ruined city was never silent for long. Smoke always drifted over the broken towers, and the air carried the hum of enemy drones. Paul had grown used to living in the shadows, moving from one hiding place to another. But now he was not alone. Arya, the alien warrior whose armor he had repaired, stood at his side. She had promised to protect him, and Paul was beginning to see what that truly meant. Every time she moved, her silver armor glowed with power, now strengthened by his repairs. Every time her golden eyes turned toward him, he felt safer, though the world outside was still filled with danger. For 2 days they stayed hidden in the underground workshop. Paul worked on tools and checked Arya's armor while she stood guard at the entrance. She hardly spoke, but her actions spoke for her. She gave him food from her emergency rations, watched over him while he slept, and scanned the area whenever she heard movement above. Paul felt strange. He had never been this close to someone so different, someone who came from a people who had once been enemies. Yet every time he saw her standing like a shield between him and danger, he felt that maybe things could change. But peace did not last. On the third morning, Paul was fixing a broken generator when Arya suddenly raised her head. Her golden eyes glowed sharper. She pressed her hand against her helmet, scanning the air. Paul froze. He had seen that look before. "What is it?" he asked, already fearing the answer. She raised her arm and pointed toward the tunnel. Her meaning was clear. The enemy had found them. Paul's chest tightened. He grabbed his tool bag instinctively, though he knew tools would be useless in a fight. "We need to run." But Arya shook her head. She placed her hand firmly on his shoulder and pushed him back toward the corner of the workshop. She spoke in her language, low but powerful. He did not understand the words, but the tone was enough. She was telling him to stay behind her. The rumble of machines grew louder. From the tunnel came the whirring of drones and the heavy steps of armored soldiers. The sound filled the underground space like thunder. Paul's heart raced. "They know we're here. There are too many." Arya did not move. She stood tall, her armor humming as energy surged through it. Her shield activated with a sharp flash, covering her left arm in a blue glow. Her right hand gripped the energy blade that extended with a hiss of power. She looked like a wall of steel, unbreakable. Then the tunnel exploded with fire as the enemy entered. Dozens of drones swarmed in, their red lights scanning the room. Behind them came armored soldiers, their rifles aimed forward. The leader shouted orders in a harsh voice, and the soldiers raised their weapons toward Paul. Arya stepped in front of him instantly, her shield raised. The first volley of fire hit like a storm. Blaster shots filled the air, striking the blue shield with bursts of sparks. The ground shook under the impact. Paul covered his head, but when he looked again, Arya had not moved an inch. She held the shield firm, blocking every shot. Then she struck back. With a roar, she charged forward. Her blade cut through the nearest drone in a single swing, splitting it in half. Sparks and smoke filled the air. She spun, her boosters firing from her back, and crashed into the line of soldiers. Her blade moved like lightning, slashing through armor, forcing the rest to scatter. Paul watched in awe. He had known she was powerful, but seeing her fight at full strength was something beyond belief. She was not just defending him. She was dominating the battlefield. Drones tried to surround her, but she raised her shield, deflecting their fire, then leaped high into the air. She landed in the middle of them with crushing force, her blade striking in wide arcs. Each strike left wreckage behind. The soldiers shouted, trying to regroup. One of them raised a heavy weapon, aiming not at Arya but at Paul. Paul froze. The barrel of the weapon glowed as it prepared to fire. Before he could move, Arya saw it. With speed that made Paul's breath stop, she dashed across the workshop, shield raised. The blast fired, a glowing beam of energy screaming toward Paul. But Arya was faster. She slammed her shield into the path, and the beam exploded harmlessly against it. The force pushed her back, but she held firm, standing between Paul and certain death. Her golden eyes burned like fire. She shouted something in her language, her voice filled with rage and promise. Then she charged again. Paul stared, his heart pounding. She had chosen him, above all else, to protect. The battle lasted minutes that felt like hours. One by one, the drones fell in sparks and flames. The soldiers tried to retreat, but Arya hunted them down, her armor glowing with human and alien power combined. At last, silence returned to the underground. The floor was covered in smoke and wreckage, but Arya still stood tall, her blade humming quietly before she finally lowered it. Paul stood slowly, his legs shaking. He looked around at the destruction, then back at her. She had fought like an unstoppable force, and all of it had been for him. "You saved my life," he whispered. Arya turned toward him. Her armor was scorched, her shield cracked at the edge, but her eyes were steady. She placed her hand on her chest, then pointed at him once more. Paul shook his head, half in disbelief. "You really won't stop, will you? You'll keep fighting for me no matter what?" She gave a firm nod. Paul stepped closer, his voice quiet but full of respect. "Then I'll keep fixing your armor. I'll make sure it never fails you again." For the first time, the faintest curve of her lips appeared. It was not quite a smile, but it was the closest thing he had seen from her. They were no longer just a mechanic and a warrior. They were partners. One who fought with skill and honor, and one who kept her armor alive with creativity and care. Together, they had survived their first true battle. Paul knew more enemies would come. The war was far from over. But he also knew one thing clearly. As long as Arya was at his side, he would never face the war alone. And as long as he kept her armor strong, she would never stop protecting him. After the battle in the ruined city, the silence that returned was heavy but different this time. It was not just the silence of destruction but a quiet filled with new understanding. Paul and Arya stood together among the smoking remains of machines and broken drones. Paul could still feel his heart pounding from fear and awe. Arya's golden eyes scanned the horizon, alert but calm, her silver armor glowing softly with the power Paul had repaired. Paul finally allowed himself to breathe. "That was incredible," he said. "I've never seen anyone fight like that before. Not human, not alien." Arya turned her gaze to him. For a moment, she studied him silently, then her shoulders relaxed slightly. She had defended him with everything she had, yet she seemed curious about this human who had helped her. She lowered her weapon, and the hum of her armor softened. Paul realized something. She had begun to trust him. Over the next few days, they stayed in the hidden workshop. Paul worked on improving her armor, adding small modifications that made it more stable and more human-friendly. He tested the energy conduits, reinforced joints, and even built a simple emergency shield booster that could help her survive another battle if needed. Arya observed every step. Sometimes she pointed out where a connection was weak or a joint would not hold in a heavy fight. Paul listened carefully, learning more about her technology than he ever thought possible. The two of them communicated not just through words, but through gestures, glances, and shared effort. Slowly, they began to understand each other. One afternoon, Paul noticed her studying a small human map of the city. He walked over. "You're looking at that wrong," he said. "The alley here leads to a safe path. You don't need to fight if you go that way." She looked at him, confused. Then she touched the map, tracing the route he suggested. Paul smiled. For the first time, she nodded in understanding. "Good," he said. "See? Humans think differently, but sometimes it works." Arya tilted her head, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson. Trust was growing, not just from her side but from his as well. He had been taught to fear her kind, to avoid them, yet here she was, standing as a protector and learning from him. That evening, Paul gathered the few supplies they had and shared a simple meal with her. Arya ate slowly, carefully, yet she allowed him to sit beside her. She had never shared a meal with a human before, yet here she was, letting him be near her. Paul looked at her carefully. You know, I used to think humans were weak. That we could never survive against an army like yours. But now, seeing you fight, seeing what we can do together, I think we can. Arya studied him in silence. Then she reached out, lightly tapping his shoulder with her armored hand. It was the smallest gesture, but Paul felt its meaning clearly. She trusted him, just as he trusted her. The next day brought another challenge. Scouts from her own people appeared near the city's edge. Paul spotted them first and panicked. They're coming. They'll see you with me, and they won't forgive it. Arya's eyes glowed sharply. She moved in front of him, shield raised. Let me handle this, Paul thought he heard her say through her actions. The scouts did approach, calling out in their alien language. They had not expected to see Arya standing beside a human. Some of them hesitated, unsure what to do. Arya stepped forward, her posture strong and commanding. Paul noticed something he had not seen before. She was no longer just a soldier obeying orders. She was making her own decisions. She raised her hand, signaling the scouts to halt. Her armor glowed brighter, and the energy shield extended outward. Paul felt a sense of pride. The alien warriors were the ones he had feared the most. Yet here, in front of him, was one of their greatest fighters, standing as an ally. She was proving that trust could cross the boundaries of species. The scouts debated among themselves, then slowly withdrew. They respected her strength, but more importantly, they recognized her decision. She had chosen a human's side, not theirs. When the scouts disappeared, Arya turned back to Paul. She lowered her shield and pointed again at him, a gesture that had become familiar. He nodded in return. They were partners, bound not by orders or blood but by trust and respect. Over the following weeks, Paul and Arya explored the city together. She protected him while he searched for materials, and he repaired and improved her armor whenever it was damaged. They discovered abandoned vehicles, machines, and energy cores that Paul could integrate into her systems. The city, once a dangerous battlefield, became a place where they could grow stronger together. One day, Paul noticed her studying a broken drone. You know, he said, we can take its energy core and combine it with your shield. It will last longer in a fight. Arya watched him work, allowing him to manipulate the delicate alien technology. She adjusted a few connections here and there, teaching him how her systems functioned more efficiently. By the end of the day, her armor was stronger than ever, a combination of human ingenuity and alien power. They worked side by side, talking through gestures and shared effort. Paul realized that the trust between them was more than just survival. It was understanding. It was the recognition that humans and aliens, when united, could accomplish what neither could alone. By nightfall, they returned to their hidden workshop. Paul cleaned his tools while Arya sat near the entrance, scanning the horizon. He looked at her and smiled. We make a good team. She tilted her head, a faint acknowledgement of his words. Paul laughed softly. I think your people would be shocked to see this. A human and an alien, trusting each other. Fighting together. Her golden eyes met his, steady and unwavering. In that gaze, Paul understood something clearly. They had built more than trust. They had built a bond that would not break easily. The city outside remained dangerous, but inside their hidden workshop, there was a small corner of hope. Humans and aliens could work together. They could protect each other. And if they could survive here, maybe, just maybe, they could survive anywhere. Paul leaned back, exhausted but content. Arya placed a hand on her chest and then gestured toward him again. He nodded, understanding the promise anew. Together, they would face the battles ahead. Together, they would show that trust could overcome fear. Together, they were stronger than any enemy they would meet. And for the first time in a long time, Paul felt the war outside the city might not be hopeless after all. The city outside had changed. Once a place of ruin and constant battle, it now felt different. Smoke still rose from some areas, but the streets were quieter. Enemy forces had retreated for now, and the human survivors began to emerge cautiously from hiding. Paul and Arya walked among them, a strange but steady pair. His hands were covered in grease and scratches, while her silver armor gleamed in the morning light. Paul noticed the looks from other humans. Some were afraid. Some were curious. And some were amazed. They had heard stories of the alien warriors, and now one was walking beside a human, her blade at her side and her shield glowing faintly. Arya moved with purpose, scanning the horizon for threats. Paul kept close to her, carrying small tools and spare energy cells he had prepared. He was no longer just a mechanic fixing machines. He was part of a team, part of something bigger than himself. "People are watching us," Paul said quietly. "Do you think they'll accept you?" Arya tilted her head and gestured toward him, pointing at the humans and then at him. It was her way of saying that actions spoke louder than words. Protection, trust, and loyalty mattered more than fear or prejudice. They reached the center of the city where a group of humans had gathered. Paul noticed the fear in their eyes as they looked at Arya. She was not like them, yet she stood calmly, her armor humming with strength and purpose. Paul stepped forward. "Everyone," he said, "this is Arya. She has fought to protect us, and she will continue to do so. She is not our enemy. She is our ally." Some humans murmured, hesitant to believe it. But when Arya activated her shield and demonstrated a small energy pulse that cleared the debris blocking a nearby street, the crowd's doubts began to fade. The energy was controlled, precise, and protective. She was not here to destroy them. She was here to help them rebuild. Paul turned to her, a smile on his face. "See? Actions speak louder than words." Arya gave a short nod. Her golden eyes softened, showing a hint of what could almost be called understanding or even trust in these humans. Paul realized that this was bigger than them. Their bond, their teamwork, could inspire others. Over the next few days, Paul and Arya worked together to repair and clear parts of the city. Paul used his tools to fix broken generators and rebuild machines, while Arya lifted heavy debris, cut through wreckage with her blade, and ensured no enemy force could threaten them. They worked tirelessly, side by side. Paul noticed something remarkable. The humans who had once feared her began to help. Slowly, they began to trust both Paul and Arya. Children peeked from behind walls, watching her move with careful grace. Workers joined in, following her lead, lifting debris and clearing streets. Paul felt a sense of pride he had never experienced before. Humans were strong, and when they had an ally like Arya, they could become even stronger. Humanity's resilience was clear, and now it had a mark left by their combined effort with a warrior from beyond the stars. One afternoon, while repairing a collapsed bridge, Paul looked at Arya. "You know," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "I never thought humans and aliens could work together like this. But here we are." Arya studied the bridge for a moment. Then she raised her hand and placed it on the metal beams. A faint glow spread along the structure. Paul gasped. The alien technology had reinforced it, making it stronger than before. "See?" Paul laughed. "Together, we can do things no one could do alone." Arya's golden eyes met his, and for the first time, Paul thought he saw a hint of a smile. She understood what he meant. Humanity had left its mark not just in rebuilding the city but in forming a bond that could survive even the greatest challenges. As evening fell, the city began to look alive again. Fires had been replaced with safe lights. Streets were cleared. People moved about with cautious hope. Paul and Arya stood on the highest hill overlooking the city. The sun set behind them, casting long shadows but also a golden light that reflected off her armor. Paul took a deep breath. We've come a long way, haven't we? From hiding in the ruins to this, Arya stood silently, then placed her hand on her chest and pointed at him. The gesture was simple but powerful. It said everything words could not: loyalty, protection, trust, and respect. Paul smiled, placing his hand over hers. And we will keep going, he said. We'll keep rebuilding. We'll protect the people here. Together. The hum of her armor filled the silence, steady and strong. Paul realized that this was more than just technology or power. It was the bond between them that made them unstoppable. Arya had become a symbol not just of alien strength but of what humanity could achieve with courage and trust. In the following weeks, their reputation spread. Survivors spoke of the human and the alien who worked together, protecting the weak and rebuilding what was lost. Enemy forces began to retreat further, afraid to face a partnership so unusual and so effective. Paul and Arya became a living legend, not for destruction, but for protection and hope. Paul knew that war was far from over. Battles would come again. Enemies would test them. But now, he was not alone. Arya would fight beside him, her armor stronger than ever, her promise unbroken. And the humans, inspired by their courage, would fight alongside them. One night, as the city slept under the soft glow of repaired lights, Paul looked at Arya. You know, you've changed everything. Not just for me, but for all of us. She tilted her head, her golden eyes reflecting the city lights. Her armor hummed faintly, a soft but constant reminder of the promise she had made. Paul reached out and touched her shoulder. Humanity's mark isn't just in the machines we rebuild or the streets we clear. It's in the courage we show, the trust we build, and the bonds we make. And you've helped leave that mark. Arya placed her hand over his, a gesture of understanding. She was more than a warrior. She was part of their story, part of the mark humanity would leave on the galaxy. And as they stood there, looking at the city they had saved together, Paul realized that even in a universe full of war and danger, trust, courage, and the willingness to protect each other could change everything. Humanity had left its mark, and with Arya by his side, Paul knew that mark would last far beyond this ruined city. The night was calm, but Paul and Arya were ready. Ready for the battles ahead, ready to protect, and ready to inspire. Together, they were more than human or alien. Together, they were hope itself.